Everyone told me to play Ninja Gaiden 2, and boy was it an experience. I don't have a large history with the 2000s Ninja Gaiden titles. Back then I just watched my friend play a little bit of Ninja Gaiden Black on Xbox, but I didn't have an Xbox, so my first time playing was actually Ninja Gaiden Sigma on PS3. Back then I didn't know it was any different from the original. I thought it was fun and really challenging. I mean, if you come to that game with no experience and you jump into hard mode, you won't make it past the first level. Hard mode felt tuned for people who already knew how to play, so playing on normal first was the way to go. Sigma 1 has its problems, especially in those terrible side missions with Rachel, but as the only version I experienced, I liked it a lot, and I call myself a Ninja Gaiden fan because of it. When I revisited Sigma 1 back in 2021, I tried hard mode right away and said, oh my god, I'm getting railed. So spending a couple of days on normal helped me relearn everything I'd forgotten over 14 years. And then playing on hard became really fun for me. I'm far from a dedicated Ninja Gaiden player, very casual fan here, but I've always loved the combat. I have no interest in the story, I couldn't even tell you who Ryu Hayabusa is, I just like the way combat feels. But you know what I realized in my replaying of Sigma 1? I realized that I only like maybe half of what the game offers. Several enemies are just tedious to fight. Most of the bosses I find kinda boring. When I close my eyes and I think Ninja Gaiden, what makes me smile are the common enemy encounters that pushed me to play well, namely all the special types of ninjas and soldiers you go against. In my personal list of enjoyment, it's under DMC and God of War, but above Bayonetta. I never played Ninja Gaiden 2 though, and ever since my first video on Ninja Gaiden, many have requested it. I just haven't been in the mood. When I saw the announcement of the new remake, remaster, I don't know, whatever Ninja Gaiden 2 Black is, I saw that and I said, I think it's time. But I don't have an Xbox, and I wasn't in the mood to figure out how to emulate it. I own the Master Collection on Steam, which contains the Sigma versions, but I didn't want to play Sigma 2, because I heard it was very different and generally hated by the fanbase. It also massively reduced the gore. What to do? Well, a big Ninja Gaiden fan I know on Twitter set me up with a PC mod from Fiend Busa that purportedly restores the vast majority of the original game's intended experience, namely in the enemy spawns and their numbers. And good lord, what a difference it makes. I had no idea how insane Ninja Gaiden 2 was, and I now understand why the fanbase hates Sigma 2, and why the new shiny Ninja Gaiden 2 Black was panned by them. 'Cause it's Sigma 2, not Ninja Gaiden 2. It really doesn't deserve the name. The original game, or as much of it as I was able to experience through the restoration mod, was unbelievably brutal. I played on hard, assuming my knowledge of Sigma 1 would carry over, and it did generally, but the new mechanics and enemy behaviors caught me off guard. There's the Dismemberment system, where your attacks have a chance of taking off an arm or a leg, and certain attacks are much more likely to do it. Any enemy that's lost a limb can be instantly executed by pressing the heavy attack button. Was this because of how popular God of War was at the time? I don't know, but I think it's a cool addition. It also makes the pacing of combat much faster, because you're able to kill enemies faster. Therefore, they need to increase the number of enemies you're dealing with and their level of aggression to keep the challenge going. Executions provide a chunky amount of iframes, so much like a grab in a beat-em-up, you'll be using these dismembered enemies to escape terrifying amounts of incoming damage, crucial in a game that's throwing so much at you at once. This new execution system is something you end up engaging in accidentally, because it's on the heavy attack button. Often I would go for just a heavy attack or do a combo with a heavy input and I'd get an execution. I'm not a big fan of this, I wish it were a separate input. But at the same time, it was interesting to discover certain combo strings that cancel directly into execution. You can do forward light light into a rolling attack and the next heavy attack will execute. Yeah, that was sweet. That was sweet. I got the stun from the jump arrow. I did the 1-1-2 for the dismemberment, dashed forward, and got the execution. That shit feels good. I really like that about this game. This way of doing it, while not to my personal preference, does set the game's systems apart from other games, and I can respect that. It's interesting, I got used to it. Thanks to the chat during my live stream, I started using shurikens after certain strings like light, light, heavy to cancel the recovery frames and go straight for an execution. Or the very fun light, hold, heavy for an air launch, cancelled into shuriken toss and then flying swallow for an in-air dismemberment. Thanks guys for the tips. I could feel pretty quickly that Ninja Gaiden 2 has a much bigger emphasis on movement. I use the dash way more, which is faster this time and recovers much quicker. I tried to catch enemies for a whiff punish when I avoided their final attack. And I started experimenting with the enemy step move and air throws. I'm not saying I mastered any of these techniques or even used them effectively, but the more I experimented, the more I was able to handle the chaos around me. I'm still not very good, but I slowly learned and I'm playing a lot better now. And there's definitely been an attempt to get people to stop using Ninja Gaiden 1's more obvious abusable tactics, namely the flying swallow and the Izuna drop. Because the new hyper-aggressive enemies will immediately punish you during the recovery frames of these powerful options. Enemies would swing at me as soon as I did a badly timed jump, knocking me out of the air. I can't just loop wall runs into heavy attack like I could in the first game. And if you're just standing there blocking, their insanely fast grabs will teach you quickly that it simply isn't an option. You need to go on the offensive and play smart. Without getting into the discussion of how grabs can be total bullshit, as well as other overtuned things, I do generally like and prefer Ninja Gaiden 2's mechanics and combat design over the original. Where I have a problem is in how visually cluttered it all is. Since Ryu is so much more powerful and capable this time around, the only way to keep him under control is to overwhelm him with numbers. And that exacerbates the camera problems the series has. They should have pulled it back to show more of the battlefield if they want to ramp up the combat this much. Because when you have 8 gargoyles on screen blocking the camera with their wings with no transparency applied to enemies, the game turns into a mess. Sure, after a couple days I did eventually get better at managing the camera and repositioning it, but it was still a constant source of tedium. And when you can't see, and there's so many enemies all doing their attacks at once and grabbing you, shooting you with explosives from off screen, strategic and varied play goes out the window, especially when many of your best options are highly punishable, and if you wait too long for a good opportunity, you'll just get grabbed. I worry this is going to be misinterpreted as me saying there's no way to play this game strategically or in an interesting, fun way, and that's not what I mean. Of course, there's a lot of strategy to learn, and the better you are, the more skillfully you can play. What I mean is that the game is designed to be so overwhelming and the camera is so wonky that if this is your first time, it's going to be more reliable to try to play it more conservatively and cheaply in order to get through a lot of these encounters. But yes, on replay, the fun of Ninja Gaiden 2 is figuring out how to incorporate more skillful, expressive style now that you know what you're doing. The game is incredibly difficult, sometimes for the right reasons and sometimes for the wrong ones. And they knew it was way harder because they added a regenerating health system that wasn't there in the first game. When fights end, your health refills up to the point where you've taken critical damage. There's a pretty neat strategy of holding block until this happens, and then absorbing any health orbs that might be around, which isn't often, but it happens. This health regeneration feels like a necessary addition given how crazy the game is, how aggressive and cheap enemies can be, and how visually incoherent things often are. I like a challenging game, I often like a brutally challenging game, but it needs to be for the right reasons, and Ninja Gaiden 2 isn't always that, but sometimes it is, it's still a good game. So in a lot of fights, it feels like the game wants me to simply use my ultimate attacks as much as possible because it's the safest thing to do. It hits everybody and does good damage, it loops into itself by running away and instantly charging another by absorbing essence. I see that even high-level players and speedrunners are regularly abusing ultimates to get through these parts where there are just too many enemies on screen to be able to play in any other way, and that just sucks. I didn't want to play this way, and I tried to avoid going into fights with that plan in mind. I got my ass kicked for it, sometimes getting stuck in one fight for an hour, but that's okay. I was trying to learn, I wanted to use everything the game had to offer. I wanted the fact that I was getting better at defense, at combos, and even camera management to be what got me through the challenge. But when the screen is overwhelmed with so many enemies, it feels dumb not to just use a bunch of ultimate attacks to kill at least half of them before attempting to fight legitimately, if that's what you want to do. One of the biggest mechanical changes I noticed across Ninja Gaiden 1 and 2 is the use of ultimates, because in the first game, your first level of charge would only do a single slash. It was powerful, sometimes it would decapitate, but it was just the single attack. You had to reach level 2 to get the big combo attack. Since Ninja Gaiden 2 is focused much more on higher enemy counts and managing chaos, level 1 goes directly to a combo attack. This change alone tells you how different these games are. You need those crowd control options, and you need them often. If I'm not using ultimates a lot, I feel like I need to air launch to stay away from the chaos and actually keep myself in camera view. And normally I would love that. I love air combos, and I love feeling pressure to air launch to stay away from ground threats. Some of you may remember that was a big criticism I had of DMC5, where the highest starting difficulty was so easy that I never felt like I needed to focus down enemies with air combos. Here I felt that pressure all the time, if I wasn't going to abuse ultimates. But Ninja Gaiden 2 has not expanded on the very limited air combo options found in the first game. If you're using the Master Sword, it's either light attack into heavy downward stab, or the full Izuna drop. There's no other combo string you can do like in other hack and slash games, so the air combo play becomes really repetitive. All of what I just said is why Ninja Gaiden 2 eventually just wore out my patience. There's a lot I like about the combat design, and it was rewarding to figure it out, but the whole let's just throw as much bullshit at the player as possible regardless of if it works with the camera style was pretty off-putting, and eventually I just wanted it to be over. I think what makes me tired is that many of the biggest fights are just waves of one single enemy type, maybe two, which makes them uninteresting. You're just killing the same guys over and over for a long time, even longer if you're dying a few times. Waves of dudes with wings so big they block the camera and their hit stun is random, it just gets monotonous. Even on replays, as I'm getting better at the game, I'm still worn down by these endurance tests that have little to no variety. I finally beat the game, but I didn't have the desire to replay it and master it and become a Ninja Gaiden player. Not the way I did with God of War and Devil May Cry. 'Cause it's not like the levels are very interesting, and it's not like the boss battles are good. My friend that sent me the mod made it very clear, don't let anyone gaslight you into, oh, Ninja Gaiden 2 bosses are actually good. And I won't let them, I promise. I'm sorry, I just don't like what's going on here. The 1v1 format for Ninja Gaiden is pretty uninteresting, at least on a casual level. I know that mastering a boss fight, even a bad one, is many times a fun and rewarding exercise for dedicated players. If you've figured out Elibat and can just bend her over and you think it's a lot of fun, I'm happy for you. If shooting arrows and using supers against the water dragon makes you climax, good for you. And you're dealing with bosses that seem to just randomly not be affected by your attacks, sometimes getting hit during their recovery frames, and other times just deciding they get to avoid it even though it's the same punish. It feels random. If it isn't random, it feels like it. Again, I'm sure you can master this stuff, but fighting these bosses outside of mastery, actually figuring out the fight, was not very fun. There's no camera lock on either, so if you're fighting a high mobility boss, you gotta adjust the camera all the time. Yeah, I'm just not a fan of these bosses for the most part. Except for that big lightning worm in the subway, that was great. Possibly the best boss fight I've played in years. Way better than that random other white-haired guy in DMC3. So I beat Ninja Gaiden 2 on hard mode, and I thought I was done with it after that. The last boss fights were shit, and while I do have a lot of love for Ninja Gaiden's combat systems, I don't hold the games anywhere near as high as other hack and slashers. So I had no intention of playing it again. But I was curious about Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, so I got it. And yeah, I see why people were disappointed by this. I stepped up the difficulty to very hard this time around, and even still, nearly every single enemy encounter was nerfed into the ground. I was never punished once for an Izuna drop or flying swallow. The enemy numbers were much lower, some rooms that used to have huge fights in them are just completely empty. I guess all this comes from Sigma 2, and that's why Sigma 2 is hated. 2 Black has some moderate camera adjustments, which are appreciated, and I struggle less with the camera due to the less crazy fights, but most of the time I was just bored. I played 4 levels, 4 boss fights, and then I got dumped into one of the Sigma girl levels, and I said, nope, I think I'm done. Before I go, I want to mention the game's tutorialization and XP system. I really appreciate the reminders sprinkled throughout Ninja Gaiden 2. In a mechanics-heavy game like this, it can be easy to forget something you read about hours ago. So as you progress, not only will you discover tips about things like ultimate charging, dashing out of guard, and the flying swallow attack, but you'll also find journal entries of people talking about these abilities by name. And you'll think, what was that again? And you'll go to your scroll list and read about it and go, oh right, that move, okay, I should try that. I think that's really damn cool. Now let me balance out that praise with some more complaining. I'm very disappointed that Ninja Gaiden 2 Black does nothing to communicate the XP system. Enemies drop essence when they die, which is used to buy expensive weapon upgrades and life-saving items in the shop, and you can either collect it by releasing block, or use it to charge an ultimate, which makes it charge faster. Does the essence make your ultimate do more damage? No. Do enemies killed by an essence-charged ultimate drop more valuable essence as a result? Yes. Is the value of essence changed by the method of killing enemies or by their size? If I'm abusing a specific move, does the value of essence go down? I have no fucking idea, because there's no readout on screen of how much you're gaining or how your actions affect what you gain. How does the hit counter figure into this? Am I multiplying essence value by raising my hit counter? Do hits against enemies that have already died count the same towards the multiplier as hits against the living? Why is there no information about how all this works? Item and weapon upgrades are very expensive. If I had something showing me during combat how my actions were affecting essence gain, I would be far more mindful of it and actually develop strategy around it. Yeah, you can go on forums and look this stuff up, or you can ask a friend, which is what I do, but if you're gonna remake the game almost 20 years later, and you're gonna redo all the menu screens and inventory screens and all the text, why not include an optional on-screen notification system to inform us how we're actually affecting the way we make money, since spending money is so incredibly important? In stylish character action titles like this, it's fun to keep in mind how your actions affect your XP gain. Whether it's DMC, Bayonetta, Ultra Kill, or God of War, feeling the pressure to buy things and having a clear way to earn more currency to do so through a clearly communicated combat system leads to more experimentation and creative play. Ninja Gaiden gets me to play well through a direct sense of challenge and survival, and I love that. But if it communicated the other side of things, I'd also care about maintaining a combo and trying to get more currency. A few days after starting the editing for this video, I got the itch to revisit Ninja Gaiden 2 again, back to the modded Master Collection, and this time I stepped up the difficulty to very hard, and I was shocked at how good I was. I mean, I suck compared to anyone actually good, but right away I was handling the opening goons in style. Air combos, shuriken cancel executions, air shurikens to stun and then set up the approach, instant ultimates on demand. I was kicking ass, and it felt really good. I became more accepting of the game Ninja Gaiden 2 is, flaws and all. If I gotta use ultimate spam, I'll use ultimate spam. If I gotta do 7 Izuna drops in a row to keep myself from exploding, I'll do 7 Izuna drops in a row. It is what it is. The shitty camera was something I just eventually accepted and dealt with. And fuck anything that has to do with water in this game. While the boss fights still mostly sucked, I think Genshin might be growing on me a little since I found out you can actually air launch them sometimes. I do get tired of it after a while, but in spurts of a few hours here and there, it's a pretty good time, and I think I'll come back to it more. So that's what I think of Ninja Gaiden 2. It was a mixed experience, kind of like how the first game is a mixed experience, but in different ways. It was fun, I loved the new mechanics, and it was cool to finally learn about the deeper side of these games. I totally suck at it, but that's okay, I'm still gonna call myself a fan. Thanks for pushing me to finally play it, I'm glad I did. Spare me the comments about how I didn't play the true version, I don't care, and recommend me more hack and slash titles. The more of them I play, the wider my perspective is, and I love that. Thanks for watching, everyone.